welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. The day that I'm recording this is actually July 14th, which means that starting tomorrow, students are going to have access to their AP scores. One thing you're going to want to know though is that it is a staggered release. This is not anything new. The College Board has done this for several years. And basically what that means is depending on where you live, there might be a different day that you get your scores. Because I think the reason is if everybody who took an AP test was to try to log onto the website at the same time, it would probably crash. And so the idea is to stagger it a little bit. So the College Board has a schedule based on the different states or areas, and you can look that up on their website. But basically, some students are going to get their scores starting July 15th, and then others will get it the 16th or the 17th. I know it might seem a little bit unfair to have to wait, but the idea is that there's going to be less tech problems, I believe, if they stagger the results. So when you get your results, you're going to see a number, 1 through 5. That is going to be your composite score. So for AP Lang specifically, students had 50 minutes to read a passage and write one essay. Each essay was scored by 2 different readers, and there was a 6-point rubric. So you might be wondering, okay, how does a 6-point rubric with 2 scores convert to a 1 through 5 score? And to be honest, as teachers, we don't exactly know, because the College Board has said that depending on the difficulty of the passage, that would influence how the cut scores are determined. And so we don't actually know what score you needed to achieve on your essay in order to make a certain composite. And I don't believe we'll ever actually find that out, especially because of the number of prompts that were out there. So between the actual test and the makeup test, and I think there was like another round of it, there were over 20 prompts. And so I don't think we're gonna find out, what score students needed to make, but you will see your composite. And so a lot of times students look at that composite number and they start to use language like I passed or I failed. And I wanna take a second to explain to you why that might be problematic language. So the College Board doesn't actually use those terms. They say a qualifying score or a not qualifying score. And you might be thinking, okay, Coach Hall, but passing and qualifying are the same thing. And while I understand your point, here's what I've seen as a teacher. I've seen some really talented students not get the score that they thought they were going to get. And so even if they made a 3, if they were expecting a 4 or a 5, in their minds they failed. And it wasn't a failure. I've also seen students get a 1 or a 2 and say, oh my goodness, I failed. And while they didn't meet a qualifying score, it doesn't mean that they got nothing out of the class. So there are a couple of things here. I know that a lot of students take AP classes to try to get that college credit, and I know you've invested a lot of time and energy, not just into your studies, but also that test. I know it was pretty nerve-wracking for a lot of kids because of the time constraints and having to take it at home, so I understand that. What I want you to think about is that, quite frankly, you deserve praise because you took a test in the middle of a global pandemic. You probably hadn't seen your teacher in like 8 or 9 weeks, except for remote instruction. And so that in and of itself is an achievement. And so when you look at your scores, I want you to think about all that you had to overcome and all that you had to do to prepare for this test, because the knowledge that you gained and the skills that you gained, like the work ethic, the perseverance, and just the ability to analyze a passage if it was an AP Lang test, those are skills that are going to carry with you beyond this class. And I can say that because I also teach a concurrent credit class in my district, and basically that class is College English 1 and College English 2. And I've had students who made a qualifying score on the AP Lang test still choose to take that class, either because they didn't feel they wanted to take AP Lit, or they were going to go to a college that accepted the same score for AP Lit and AP Lang, so there was no reason for them to take AP Lit in their mind. Or maybe in 1 or 2 cases, the student made a qualifying score on AP Lang, but they would have needed to make a certain score on the Lit test in order to get other college credits. And they didn't want that pressure, whereas if they took the concurrent credit class, then they would have gotten the credits that they needed. So there's lots of reasons why students take concurrent credit. I have had some students who made a 2 on the AP Lang exam take the college English class, and they said that honestly they felt so prepared for it because a lot of the skills were the same and they felt that they were ready. And so one thing I want to keep in mind is that you took this class over the course of a year and it's a college level class, but you're a junior in high school. And so you might not be what some people might consider college ready just yet, but it doesn't mean that you're not capable. It doesn't mean you won't be ready when you do go to college. You guys are juniors in high school, most of you, and now you're rising seniors. So one thing to keep in mind is that sometimes it takes students a little longer than a year. So I tend to work with most of my students over the course of their sophomore and junior year, but I have seen students grow so much in that time. And then if I do have them again as seniors, they continue to grow. So this is an ongoing process. And so sometimes I think it's really frustrating to get a score that you weren't expecting or that you didn't want, because I think it's easy to dismiss it and say, oh, I'm not good enough or something. But in actuality, it just means that on that day for that essay, you didn't write a qualifying score. It does not mean that you're not really ready for college, because I've seen kids who are brilliant, just not test well. And I've seen kids who have come from probably a really low 1 and then they get a 2 at the end of the year. And I celebrate that as much as I celebrate a 3, a 4, or a 5, because I've seen that progress. And so unfortunately, when you get a composite score of like a 2, you don't really know if you were a high 2 or a low 2. Like there isn't any kind of breakdown like that. But I don't want you to have like self-doubt just because of your composite score. So I know that that might not be the kind of thing that you're wanting to hear. I know it's probably easier said than done, but keep in mind that a qualifying score just means that that on that day you were able to perform. It's not, a definition of who you are. So let's talk about qualifying scores for a second. What does that mean, and what do you do with that information? So a qualifying score for several colleges is going to be a 3. Some colleges consider a 4 a qualifying score. So what you're going to need to do is, if you haven't started making your college list yet, when you start to make your college list, you're going to want to look at what they will accept your AP scores for. So like if you got a 3, will they accept that? And if so, which class does it essentially test you out of? And this information should be on each college's website. Sometimes it's a bit tricky to find, but you should be able to find it. If you can't find it, then I would recommend talking to your guidance counselor, because they might be able to direct you to that webpage, or they might know information about that particular college. But one thing to keep in mind is that you're going to have to send your scores to the college. They don't just magically know what score that you got. And so I would talk to your guidance counselor about that as well. Admittedly, I'm not as informed as I would like to be about that part of the process, but I do know that when I have talked to my own students about it, we've gone through and we've looked at their different scores for not just AP Lang, but if they took other tests as well, and we looked at would it earn them college credit, and if so, what were their next steps. So one thing to keep in mind is that a 3 at one college might be acceptable and it might test you out of, let's say, Comp 1 and 2, but then at a different college, it might only test you out of Comp 1. At a different college, you might need a 4 in order to test out. So you're going to want to look at each individual college. Please don't just assume that because you made a 3 that you automatically get college credit. You want to look at the individual colleges, and I honestly recommend keeping track of a spreadsheet anyway as you make your college list. And that would be one of the things that I would put in the spreadsheet, is basically which classes they're going to accept your AP credit for and that kind of thing. Okay, so once you've seen your results, you might be wondering, okay, what's next? And to be honest, this is going to depend on what your school offers. But as you're looking up the qualifying scores for AP Lang, I would recommend that you look up the qualifying scores for AP Lit as well. If your school offers AP Lit, that might be the next best class for you. You might have already signed up for it, or you might have a different option, a concurrent credit class. Now, I know some schools combine AP and concurrent credit, so it really depends on your school. And I would also recommend speaking to your teacher. So here's the thing about the College Board. The College Board has an open enrollment policy, an open door policy, which means that there are no prereqs. You don't have to take AP Lang in order to take AP Lit. They want it to be inclusive. And so I would recommend, if you're not sure about AP Lit, talking to your previous AP Lang teacher, see what they recommend, that kind of thing. So you might be wondering, what is the difference between AP Lang and AP Lit? And basically, AP Lang is either predominantly or entirely nonfiction based. So things like speeches and letters and articles. Whereas AP Lit is a little bit different because one of their essays is about poetry, one is about short fiction, that's the one that kids wrote in 2020, and one is more of an open-ended prompt about like a novel or a play, and you get to choose which one you write about. So if you prefer fiction, or if you feel like AP Lang helped you gain better writing skills and you want that challenge, then definitely look into AP Lit. That is a viable option. Now, as far as which one is easier, I think that's definitely a matter of opinion. You can absolutely take AP Lit without having taken AP Lang. From my experience, most students feel like AP Lang is a little bit easier content-wise, but they took AP Lang and then they felt like certain aspects of AP Lit were easier. So an example would be that I've had students tell me that they struggled more in AP Lang to get their timing down, but then when they switched to AP Lit, they were able to pace themselves better because they had that practice with the timed writing in AP Lang. So that could be a benefit as well. So for some students, it's not really about the content itself. It's the fact that AP Lang was like the first time they really had to do timed writes, but then in AP Lit, they had already done it. Some students find out that they strongly prefer nonfiction or they strongly prefer fiction. And so that's important to understand as well. And as far as like the skills, the rubrics are very similar. Both of them have a 6-point rubric. There is a defensible thesis point in both of them. There's a sophistication point in both of them. So the rubrics look very similar. But as far as what you're analyzing, that's a bit different. Now there is a bit of a connection, I guess. I don't know if I could call it an overlap, but there is definitely a connection or a relationship between rhetorical choices and literary devices, in my opinion. So I do think that a lot of the skills that you learned in AP Lang are going to be ones that would transfer well, as far as like how to write something well and what to look for. And to be honest, a lot of the classes that you took prior to AP Lang are probably classes that introduced you to some of the skills that you would need for AP Lit. So in other classes, maybe in your 10th grade or 9th grade year, you might have examined poetry, or you might have read works of fiction or short stories and had to look for things like symbolism and that kind of stuff, and theme. You know, you probably already know a lot of these skills at a general level, and then AP Lit would be a bit more in depth. Now I'm trying to speak very generally here because it does depend on your teacher and your background and things like that, but that's kind of like the big difference. Now a concurrent credit class is basically affiliated with a college, and so if your school offers something like concurrent credit, College English 1 and 2, or Comp 1 and Comp 2, then that would be a class where basically you would get college credit from that particular university, and depending on which colleges you want to apply to, it could transfer. So I know for my concurrent credit class, if students are going in-state, then pretty much every in-state school will accept it. Maybe not a couple of the private ones, but definitely the public universities will. But if students want to go out of state, then chances are it's not going to be a credit that will transfer. So that would be something to look into as well. An AP score, like a qualifying AP score, is more, I guess, like versatile as opposed to a concurrent credit college English class, just because a lot of times it's very state specific. And so even if the content's really similar, AP scores tend to be more universal. So those are some things to consider as well. So before you guys look up your AP scores, I want you to remember a couple things. First of all, a test score does not define you. And also, no matter what the results are, I want you to validate your experience. You worked hard, you studied hard, you did something that was very difficult, quite frankly, unprecedented. Now, in the future, I don't know that the College Board is going to ever have a one essay test again, even if we do have to go back to at-home instruction, but you guys had to adapt to the entire world changing around you. Your education changed, the tests changed, and so I applaud you for that. And so I want you guys to get in that mindset of qualifying or not qualifying, and if the score isn't what you expected, I'm not saying to dismiss it necessarily, but I do want you to acknowledge that it was one day of your life. So even though it's supposed to be this culmination of the course, it is, but it isn't. And so give yourself grace. I know it can be really difficult to see scores that you weren't expecting, but I want you to celebrate the small victories and also view challenges as something to overcome. So if the score is not what you intended, then perhaps it means that you need to work on your test taking abilities, or maybe you weren't quite ready for this type of rhetorical analysis essay yet. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough or that you're not going to be ready, because quite frankly, I've seen students improve so much over the course of a year, and I have a lot of my students for either 2 or 3 years because of the courses that I teach. And the person that they are when I first meet them and the person they are when they graduate are two totally different people. Not just like the writer that they are, but the person that they are. So sometimes we need those negative experiences in our life in order to help shape us. It's an opportunity to say, you know what, like this was not what I wanted, but I'm going to overcome it. I'm going to work harder. Or it's an opportunity to say, you know what, I did learn a lot from the class. I am better because of it, but this is just not my forte. And that's okay as well. You're not expected to be like amazing at everything. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm sure you learned something from the class, even if your score isn't what you wanted. So I hope you guys get the results that you want. If you guys do get a positive result and you want to share that, then go ahead and leave it in the comments below. If you guys watch my videos in order to prepare and you found them helpful and you think that that was something that would benefit others and you have suggestions, I would love to hear about that as well. And also, if you guys are rising seniors and you're interested in how to write a stronger college application essay, personal statement, scholarship essay, whatever it is, make sure you're subscribed to the channel because I am doing videos about that this summer. I'm also going to start uploading some SAT and ACT prep videos. And I had a few people ask, are you going to do AP Lit videos next year? And the answer is yes, but not to the extent that I do AP Lang videos, because AP Lang is my specialty. But I do want to try to help those who are taking the class, and I do want to expand my abilities as well professionally. So I am going to record some AP Lit videos throughout the year, but definitely not as many as the AP Lang videos that I recorded. And I am going to continue my AP Lang content because I have a lot of rhetorical analysis videos, but I do want to also address the synthesis and the argument essay, and I want to continue helping students with rhetorical analysis. So anyway, if you're kind of curious about the direction this channel is going, that's the answer. And until next time, guys, happy writing!